just because something was invented in 1935, it doesn't mean that there was a line of bodybuilders waiting outside a SEBA waiting to get their testosterone.
And there's it seems to me back in the day, SEBA came out with Diana Ball in '58,
Hmm.
and even before in the '40s, he had testosterone from like Chicago stockyards. They would use testicles of the animals, and you're a biochemistry guy, and they'd extract raw testosterone. They'd experiment with it. But talk to Terry Todd. I said, how come bodybuilders weren't using it back then? He said it was way too harsh, way
Yeah, yeah,
too androgenic, and they would have to get catheterized because they couldn't
yeah,
pee. So
absolutely.
anyhow,
No, you're right. I mean, on that topic, um, I know because I'm a biochemist and I've studied the whole history of it. Um, sure, people will always say it was available, but we're talking about morons here, literal medical morons, right?
yeah,
I
yeah,
love, and I'm quoting directly Mike Mensa here because that's how we put them. Medically, medical moron means that I don't know if people know this, but the term, what are they? Moron, imbecile, and idiot reflects actual IQ levels, right? Moron is a person that has an IQ of under 75.
yes,
And imbecile is under 50, and an idiot is completely helpless under 25.
yeah. It has definite medical definitions
Yeah.
levels. Yeah,
Now it's called retard, moderately retarded, and severely retarded. But they are
yeah.
actual medical terms. And I hate to, and the reason I'm saying all of this, which some people might find funny or get offended, and I don't really care, is that in my opinion, I think you know, there's a lot of morons, medical morons, unfortunately, that are involved in bodybuilding, and therefore they don't use their brains because I hate to say it, they don't have the brains to process this data, right?
Sure.
They don't understand. Just because something was invented in 1935, it doesn't mean that there was a line of bodybuilders waiting outside a SEBA waiting to get their testosterone. I think it's
Yes,
bloody ridiculous, right? They have no ability to think 10 seconds in front of their face, right? That's why I call them morons, because I really believe that they have a very low IQ to be able to think that way, right? If they think at
I
all.
would say, I don't call these guys fools. Well, I do in my mind, but they make foolish decisions. And I had one friend of mine, Al Yakic, who I think he's a
Yeah.
Chicago guy. That back in the day, steroids were a rumor. So for the first couple of
Yeah.
years, 61, 62.
Yeah.
And another friend of mine, he said, well, Dr. Ziegler invented it. I said, no, he didn't. That's like your family doctor deciding, I think I'm going to invent something for diabetics. It's a whole machine. Ziegler had some input.
Yeah.
He had a biochemical background, but he was a arch conservative and he wanted to beat the Russians and all that. So he promoted it. But that was SIBA.
You just said it. He promoted it. He didn't invent it. Sieber invented it. But there's a point I'm trying to make as well. Like, sure, testosterone was initially identified and synthesized as the male hormone in 35, then quickly made available by the late 30s. And you're right. If people actually, instead of just mouthing off and talking rubbish, um, decided to just do a little bit of research, it literally takes 1 minute, and head on to PubMed and find out the original medical journals, and will quickly find that the oral and injectable methyl testosterone that was available was extremely toxic to the liver, had a half-life, if I'm not mistaken, of a few hours, and therefore was extremely toxic to the body in general, right? And this is the thing I always pose as a question. If since 1935 the testosterone they created was so perfect that you had suddenly Grimmick on it, Reeves on it, Reg Park, all of them, suddenly they all exploded into growth. Why did they invent Dianabol then? If it was working so well, why do that?
Yeah, good
That
point. And you're right. You're accurate.
that's a waste of
Yeah,
of government spending on scientific projects. It doesn't make any sense. And again, I've studied the whole thing. And what happens is they realize its toxicity. So they decided to play with the structure to remove, as you mentioned, the androgenicity. That's when anabolic steroids came out with minimized androgenic effects, because the androgenic effects was obviously logically causing all these issues like liver toxicity and severe prostate enlargement, which, as you mentioned, meant that these guys had to pee out of a freaking straw, right? Whoever you I mean, people just don't think, right? And it's amazing. I've got an original booklet from Wayne Galash that shows the initial experimentation, I should say experimental cycles, and it's amazing. One of the first cycles was testosterone mixed with estrogen, because the idea was we want to reduce the androgenicity, so let's use estrogen, which is
yeah,
absolutely stupid, because then these guys started having enlarged prostates and large breasts, right? But my point is, look at the thought process, right? The thought process was, over the years, let's try and reduce the androgenicity until we find the perfect combination or compound, until finally, of course, Pandora's box opened when Diana Ball.
yeah. The horse left the barn.
Yeah, that's when
Uh,
Diana was created. So
yeah, it's interesting. And of course, I'm a science guy, and you're a science guy, and it's my hobby and my passion, bodybuilding in all its forms. But the average guy, the average gym rat, they
mhm.
don't care. It's like marijuana. They're not going to read up on marijuana. They just smoke it. So, and today I mean, it's almost a cliche. It's boring that guys go to the gym 2 months later, they're on 6 kinds of steroids. It's so
Yeah, yeah.
ridiculous. And, you get a good trainer, you know what you're doing. You don't need all that stuff.
Moving back to Bill now.
Yeah.
There's a reason why I've mentioned all this, because obviously we come back down to Diana Ball again. And I want to share a story before a story or two actually before we move back to Bill. As you
Sure.
mentioned, in the early 60s, the rumors started coming out. I mean, Bill Pearl admitted to using Nilevar back in either in the early 60s or late 50s, which explains his transformation, which I did a video about. And it's his own admission. And it was one of the first he was one of the first successful transformations. He was by no means the first person to experiment with anabolic steroids. That was already occurring with the Russians, and whether we know before or not, it's to be argued. But definitely by the 50s, it was mid 50s especially, was already being experimented with.
Yes.
And you had successful transformations and unsuccessful transformations, with Bill Pearl's being one of the more obvious successful transformations. And of course, then Diana Bell came out. And I've spoken to both Bob and to Don Howarth about all of this. And Bob shared to me that Larry Scott, of course, he's already admitted to it as well, experiment with Diana Bell. But Bob said that Larry told him that he would just take a handful, right? And that was what his cycle would be, right?
That's his dose.
Yeah,
Yeah.
his dose. Whereas I've also read that it was 2 or 3 a day, which was 15 milligram, because they were just 5 milligram tablets, right? Of course, he had 5 and 10 milligram, but he experimented only with the 5. And others would say, like Bob, that Larry told him, "You take as much until your nose bleeds."
I've heard that. I've heard that quote. That's great. It's very medically sound.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm getting at, right?
Yeah.
Then Don Howarth would tell me, yeah, when I was training in Pasadena, you had occasionally some guys come in with a bottle and they just pass it around, right?
Yeah.
And now this is the point. This is exactly the point. How scientific was the cycles? People ask me, give me the cycle of Larry Scott. What's Don Howarth's cycle? There was no cycle. You don't
Yeah. Yeah.
understand.
Yeah.
Guys are so stupid that you don't understand that
They don't.
there was literal just experimentation, right? Now, I'm not stating that you can gain a body like Larry's or Don naturally. I still don't think that's achievable. I think you can get close to it because they were only experimenting with very minimal doses.
Uh,
But still, let's be honest, Larry's and Don's physique was phenomenal. It was already superhuman, right? But the point is that these guys literally were the first guinea pigs to truly start experimenting. And it was not a regular thing. They would, when it was only available and passed around the gym, that's when
yeah. Yeah. I
they would
agree.
go set number, I'm going to ramp up and
Oh
ramp down.
yeah. They make a spreadsheet and
Yeah.
well, the funny thing is I asked Larry Scott in person when he came to Duncan White, Bob Guy brought him out to guest pose, and it was a strength show. And then Bob said, or Guy just said, let's get Sergio Oliva out here. So Scott and Oliva were on stage posing together, and it
Nice.
gives me goosebumps. There are no pictures I've ever seen of that, but I was there that night. So I asked Larry Scott, who my idol, right? I said, Larry, excuse me, he's sitting in this beautiful blue suit on the card table, really classy, typical dungeon gym. I said, Larry, do you ever use, excuse me, you ever use Diana ball? And he goes, never. And I said, okay, thank you. And I creep off, 17 years old. And he goes, hey, kid, never more than 3 times a day.
Exactly. I've heard that one. I've heard that one. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
he used it on me. And then, and the other thing is, get back to Diana ball development. Ziegler, Dr. Ziegler, MD, he did no beta testing. It was like, he was supposed to sort of be
Yeah.
the guy. And he
Yeah,
would
yeah.
write
It was
up on a
random.
napkin, and
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
it was just
Do
like, if you,
this, do that.
yeah, try this, and go chew some of these and
Yeah, yeah.
M&Ms. And, it's just, it's funny to us who sort of know the drill for this stuff.
Yeah.
And, but they don't care, nobody cares. Everybody
Well,
wants to be
in
Arnold.
all honesty, it's not discussed because I mean I know all of this, but I haven't discussed it yet on my channel either. I've talked about the synthesis of testosterone, its inferior results early on, the birth of Dianabol, the first successful transformation, Bill Pearl's with Nilva. But I haven't talked about Dianabol extensively. I do plan to. And this is the first time I've really openly talked about all the information I've gathered over the years. But now this brings me to the question I wanted to ask you about Bill. Um, it's been stated by many bodybuilders that by the mid 60s to late 60s, so mid to late 60s, every, almost every single bodybuilder in the gym was using some form of anabolic steroids, right? And
Well, I would say, I'll just interject that if you want to be a state winner or a national winner, you're on it.
exactly.
And there's no question about that. Because I knew these guys, and you read interviews after they retire, and they tell you exactly what they're on.
Exactly.
And they didn't want to give up their secrets,
Yeah.
oh, I'm on this and that. And then the next guy beats them at the contest with it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you're accurate.
Yeah. So, I mean, you've mentioned that Bill was clean until
Bill Cino, yeah, okay.
until about the 1970
So
or
February of 72.
exactly, no, I was right, yeah,
Yeah.
72. So, I mean, that's what I particularly find very difficult to believe. And I want to say one thing, and the reason is not just because I understand the history of the Annabelle. I understand how it was circulated, which was very sporadic, let's be honest, right? I know that injectables were very hard to get, and a certain Austrian bodybuilder introduced
Certain guy, yeah.
introduced injectables onto the scene from Europe, and a certain French black bodybuilder. I mean, let's be honest. I'm gonna,
Serge Dubray,
we're talking about Surgeon Arnold, obviously.
yeah.
Were you could say two of the bodybuilders that were very prominent in the late 60s and early 70s to start bringing these things over to America. And of course, then you had the sugar daddies, so to speak,
Yeah.
that were also bringing things over. No, but let's be honest, this is how injectables came onto the scene. And again, a lot of people don't know about this. And so from your conversations, and I mean, I've read even Bill's book, and he mentions testosterone. I and I've
Yeah.
seen other blogs
Cyprian, yeah.
where he cypionate, yeah. I've seen other blogs where both testosterone and Dianabol are both mentioned. From your recollection, he never used Dianabol?
You know, I remember asking. I mean, we talked 1,000 times, and I think I did ask him about Diana Ball one time, and I think he said yes, but that was his later.
I
I
would
call
not be surprised.
right, yeah,
I mean,
so,
if he used the fact that he used testosterone tells me already, okay, but testosterone can only get you so far. And you can only use so much testosterone before you already start getting some serious effects, right?
yes, yes,
Dianabol has this effect where it puffs you up. You look like the Marshmallow Man, but
yeah. Bill Pearl,
yeah, Bill Pearl, Larry Scott, a young Arnold, right? They're all
yeah.
on Dianabol. And when I look at that famous image of Bill looking thick as a freaking wall, right? It's a black and white photo. I can't help to think that this guy must be on something more than testosterone. He's got to be on Dianabol at least.
What? Well, a couple things. I'm after the truth. You know, I don't. I'm not saying he's Michael O'Hearn or these guys were natural. Well, okay, that's what you want to believe. But Bill, couple things. I mean, he just never was that obsessed with bodybuilding. He was like a regular guy. He's like John Gorgat. He actually had a life outside of,
Mm,
you know, hanging around the gym. These guys are like gym. They're like surf bums. They're not at the beach. They're at the gym, right?
yeah.
And to them, a weight room is like a saloon to a drunk. They're there all the time. So I can't remember what I was talking. But Bill, to get back to Bill, he just to me he was clean, and I got a pretty. I mean, this is not my first rodeo, and I don't believe anybody's clean. I mean, give me a break. Maybe Chet Yorton is hard to say. He was on the cusp.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I know.
yeah, and but that'll never be settled. So was Marvin Eder? Well, he was before though. Reeves and Ross and Grimmick retired. When was their last contest? 50, 51. They were
Yeah,
miles away from Diana Balls type
yeah,
stuff.
exactly.
But they said,
You're
well,
right.
yeah,
You're right. I mean, and this is where I kind of scratch my head. I mean, I can understand Bill using testosterone because it was on the scene. There's no doubt that every powerlifter was using it, especially to get big numbers, you know.
yeah,
Um, and And I know Diana Ball was also in the scene in powerlifting. You didn't need to be a bodybuilder to use Diana Ball. But then you mentioned names like Marvin Eder. I mean, that guy was just a bloody phenom. I mean, he was just
yeah.
unbelievable. The
I
thickness.
used to talk to him. I mean, he was one of my idols. I'm going to send you an article about him.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I was fortunate to speak to Marvin before his death for a good two
Yeah,
years.
yeah, me
But
too.
in just, I mean, you have genetic freaks with no offense whatsoever to Marvin like that. That couldn't have been on anything, just they were born and touched by God to be strong, you know.
Amen.
And that's the thing, and it makes me wonder, then maybe Bill was the same, you know. The
Oh, I think so. He had wrists like a gorilla. He was just an animal.
Yeah, I know that there's genetic freaks out there, and they're very rare. And I don't say they're one in a million. I say they're one in a billion, right?
Yeah.
One in a billion, but they are out there. So there is the chance that he was just one of those, you know, one of
Well, he would. If you look at his accomplishments, he was. His world record that I was at in '65. That was as a middle heavy 198 pounder. That was one. That was 454, give or take. That's today you can have a dozen guys in a college football team doing a 450 bench. So at the time it was a world record. And then the same with this Olympic lifting. He was not that good, but he was in the senior nationals, junior nationals at a time when it wasn't that tough.
yeah,
And in powerlifting, also, he won the first world championship powerlifting in I think York. He and Bob Guida was there. Bob Guida won the most muscular and Mr. USA, which was held in conjunction with the senior powerlifting. So, and then he talked about. He said, I couldn't after 1970, I couldn't put together a competitive powerlifting. Total. We got Larry Pacifico and all these monsters. So I just wish I would have asked him. He didn't really even know what he was. I shouldn't say he didn't know. He doesn't like, well, I do this and I got my Excel spreadsheet and I ramp up and and then all this stuff.
you know.
And
Yeah,
I just
but
go, oh, okay.
there's also there's also the fact, of course, that powerlifting was at its infancy back then.
There you go.
How
Bingo.
many how many college students were powerlifting?
Very
They were
few.
all encouraged to not lift a weight, actually, right? And so, sure, Bill was a phenom, but I'm pretty sure that there were many other phenoms that had never touched a weight back then. And so,
Well, when I went to Lane Tech, 6,000 guys, I think there were 10 guys working out.
yeah, well, that's my point.
Now it's everybody and their
Yeah,
grandma. Yeah.
exactly. So what can be achieved nowadays is not just because of supplementation or steroids, but it's simply because the iron game went mainstream, and that's just
Yes.
it,
Yes.
you know. Every as you said, every Tom, Dick, and Harry does it now, and back then you were ridiculed and called gay, right? So
Oh yeah, muscle bound. It's going to hurt your heart. It's going
yeah,
to
yeah,
turn. Yeah. By the way, I got to take a swig of
yeah, no
Diana Ball
worries,
here.
no worries. So yeah, I mean, Bill was a phenom. There's no doubt about it, with or without the drugs, and yeah, just I want to, I guess, wrap things up by saying thank you, Terry,
Thank you.
for
Thank you.
for uh, for speaking to me and for answering all these questions. Yeah, it's been a
Well,
pleasure.
you're the curator. I mean, you're the curator with a video camera. You got it all going on. I think the former guy was Joe Rourke on Iron History, but that was really old. Strictly records. And then what's his name? You put it up. I think a couple hours ago. Was it John Bailick's interview with Sino?
Yeah,
That's great. And the
yeah,
thing you did just a few days ago, Bill Sino tribute, that was just my jaw dropped. That was so well done. So I
thank
sent it out to everybody and charge them $5. No, I did, but
thank you, Terry. I really appreciate it. I really do.
you're welcome. You're welcome. You're doing a great job. And what else can I say? Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll just stop the interview now, and then I've got some questions for you, just between me and you.
Yes. Sure.
Uh, Head to www.goldenerabookworm.com for the biggest range of classic old school bodybuilding books as ebooks, e-magazines such as Iron Man and Reg Park Journal, high quality bodybuilding posters of the golden era stars, merchandise, and classic gymwear featuring Steve Reeves, Marvin Eder, John Grimmick, Reg Park,
and many other Golden Era stars. For those wishing to build a classic physique, lose fat, and build muscle, online training is also available. Collectibles such as rare autographed photos from the Golden Era stars are also available, and to collaborate, please get in touch.
Now, if you're interested in learning more about Vince Gironda's approach to bodybuilding, his principles, and all these tips of wisdom that he has, I mean, there's so much stuff that probably hasn't been proven by science, and it will take science to prove or disprove Vince. But to be honest, these 3 books, I believe, which I call the Classic Physique Bundle, are the best books that Vince ever came out with. And they, of course, are the Wild Physique, the Master Series, and the Pro Series. Have a look at it this way. The Wild Physique, I believe, is like the ABCs of Vince Gironda's principles to bodybuilding. He teaches you the exercises and his principles. But how do you put them together? Well, the Master Series is a 14-month program of using all of these principles, all of the diets that Vince came out with, all of the exercises. And of course, the Pro Series was a book that he came out with later on, specially targeted for getting into competition. It's just these 3 books, as I call it, the Classic Physique Bundle, are Vince's best work, and available, of course, at www.goldenerabookworm.com.